Your teams, there we go. Slides look good.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Lovely. So you're all very welcome here to today's webinar. We're going to kick ourselves off now. And as I said, for people who have only just arrived, you will receive a copy of a recording of today's webinar as well. So what I'm going to start off with is just to introduce you quickly to today's speakers. I'm really delighted to have them with me here today. They've got such a wealth of experience and knowledge, which is so helpful to this particular subject. I'm going to go bottom up. So I'm going to start with you, Aaron, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to everyone.
Hello, I'm Aaron Snyder. You can call me Ron if you would like. I've been teaching quality system regulation, ISO 1345, for more than 10 years. I've been in the industry for 20 years. My education is math, business management. I have a master's in regulatory affairs, and I enjoy working through topics like this, quality culture, helping people understand how they can address their challenges. I'm looking forward to a good discussion today.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Cheers for that. And Aaron, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today, Katie. My name is Erin Shrimpton. I am a chartered organizational psychologist, and my special interest over the years in working as a psychologist in organizations has been around changing culture, also around helping people in that organization get through change and plan for change, and helping people to change as well. So and these days you'll find me mostly on LinkedIn Learning. I have a few courses all around culture change on LinkedIn Learning as well. So I'm delighted to be here today to talk and to delve into what are the elements that we all need to change culture and to create a great culture.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Erin. I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Katie Cooney. I'm the Director of Learning here at Leap Compliance, and I spent over 20 years working in different training roles throughout many organizations within medtech and pharmaceuticals, anything from working in operations as an operations trainer to working in HR, and then more global roles as well. So between us, we have a wealth of experience, I'm sure, and hopefully we can impart some nuggets of interest to people here today. So what is quality culture and what is its significance in the life science industry? Well, the first thing I think I'd like to try to do is just define what quality culture is and what culture is indeed. Now, I've read an awful lot of different material that has spoken about culture and defining what it is, and there are multiple definitions out there. Multiple definitions. The definition that I've chose to go with for today is the definition as it appears in the ISO 10010 standard. And actually, it's quite a good reflection of the way culture is described across many of those literature pieces and studies that have been done. So it's actually a really good one. So ISO 10010 defines culture as being integrated shared values, beliefs, history, ethics, attitudes, and observed behaviors. And that's the way they define organizational culture. Within organizational culture there, the subset is then quality culture. Quality culture is defined as supporting an achievement of a quality policy and objectives and delivery of products and services that meet the needs and expectations of customers and other relevant interested parties. So that's the way that's defined within the standard. And then what is its significance in the life science industry? Well, it's extremely significant in the life science industry. It's talked about all the time. A true quality culture is where the importance of quality and the impact on the patient is on everyone's mind. They all care about it, and they consider quality in the decisions they make day to day, day in and day out. It's very significant in terms of pharmaceuticals and medical device manufacturers producing those life-saving drugs and devices in a safe and effective manner, time after time, to get to those customers and those patients that need them. It has a big effect on the amount of risk to the patient. It has an effect on the amount of product recalls, non-conformities that you would have. And it also then ultimately has an effect on your market share and how you're perceived in the market. And quality culture, it's not unique to life sciences. It's across multiple different industries. For example, automotive. When you go to buy a car, you have in your mind that certain car manufacturers are better known for quality, and therefore you're more likely to buy from that car manufacturer because you believe them to make quality cars. The same is said in life sciences. So culture is extremely important, and it's very significant in the life science industry. But I'm interested to ask, Aaron, you're a VP for quality. What's your experience of this?
Yeah, thank you, Katie. So with that, right, the quality culture really gets put to the test when something goes wrong, right? How does the organization react to a failed test, a rejected batch, whatever it is, a nonconformance from an agency, be it from the FDA or from a registrar? Like, if the reaction is one of, it's that person's fault and we're going to scapegoat some individual, or the reaction is, let's just try to ignore it, we're going to release the product anyway, you're probably working in a poor culture at that point. And what we want to see is, when there is a problem, that the reaction is, okay, we're all in this together. How do we go about solving this in the way that protects the customer and also helps the business? And really, those two should be aligned, protecting the customer and doing what's right for the business. It's not always the case, especially when some internal groups start to go head to head. And really, at the end of the day, the behavior of the quality group itself can lead to some of the challenges that we're going to talk about later. But at the end of the day, brass tacks, when something goes wrong, how do you react? That's what highlights where your quality culture is.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that with us, Aaron. It really is a test of your culture. I can see that. And one of the things you often hear is it's quality's job, but should it be everyone's responsibility? Well, the short answer to that is yes, it should be everyone's responsibility. We all, in a sense, touch the product either directly or indirectly. We all have a bearing on it, and the belief that quality should be everyone's responsibility comes from the understanding in life science that every action can have profound consequences. And really, to have a true quality culture is where everyone is involved and everyone feels that sense of responsibility. And if you can develop a true quality culture, if you can have one that is deeply ingrained in your organization, then you are creating natural gates, checks, and fail safes that will reduce risks and will highlight issues before they become a real problem. You've got everyone working on the same team, and that is anyone at all, anyone from an R&D engineer who's creating the products, right through to a process engineer that's setting the settings on the machines to make sure that it's within, those validated parameters. So everybody is responsible because, at some level, everybody has a responsibility to the patient. I mean, you often hear Medtronic have a saying that you touch the product, you touch the patient. So I do 100% believe that, quality is everyone's responsibility, but it's kind of how you get to that. I'm interested, Erin, in asking you, what's been your experience in creating kind of cross-functional accountability when it comes to culture?
Thanks, Katie. Yes, this is something, and I've worked with organizations across sector and industry and of all shapes and sizes. And this is something that I think almost every organization struggles with in some way, shape, or form, because of course we're all human. We get into work and we just tend to narrow our focus on what it is that we're doing, and we forget that we may have responsibility for, the whole as well. But I actually, if I can give an example from an organization where I started my career many years ago now, when I worked for Innocent Smoothies, which is a brand that people who are in the UK, Ireland, and Europe may know very well, maybe not so much in the US, but they are a very successful smoothie company. And I started and I worked there when it was sort of a startup type of environment into a scale up. And one thing that really struck me about the culture there, and there was lots of things to describe about the culture there, but it was that everybody had a shared responsibility for the end product and for the end outcome, actually, which was people enjoying the smoothies. And there were lots of different ways that they did that, from, you know, the founders communicating really openly and transparently about every aspect of the business, to all of us going out and working at different events where we would be sampling the smoothies to people, and we would end up meeting consumers. But I think one thing stuck with me, which was something called the banana phone. And now when I actually started working there, I had responsibility for answering the banana phone. And on the side of the smoothie bottle, it would invite people to ring in with anything. And so sometimes it would be with a complaint, but a lot of times it would be, you know, to discuss what they think about the drinks, to discuss anything and everything. So I was in charge of answering the banana phone for a portion of my time there, but so was everybody else. So everybody in the business. So if I had to step away from answering the banana phone for whatever reason, it would ring around the whole office, and everybody would have to pick up the phone. So it would mean that if you were working in supply chain, if you were working in finance, if you were working in commercial team, you had to stop what you were doing and pick up and speak to a consumer. And what that meant was that everybody, no matter where you were, no matter what time it was, got that immediate connection to the end user of the drinks. You know, immediate, you know, you might be head down in the middle of a spreadsheet, and then suddenly you're talking on the phone to somebody about the ratio of strawberry and banana in a smoothie. And it really always brought it back, you know, to what's important here. What are we all here to do? And that is that, you know, the end consumer, the person who's buying these drinks, we're all here to make sure that that product, no matter what we do, we're all here to make sure that that product is as best as it can be. So I always use that as an example when I, you know, subsequently went and worked in culture change with organizations. You know, what is your banana phone? What is the thing that is making people on a day-to-day basis remember that we all actually do work together to make this product the best it can be? And in this situation, obviously, in the particular topic we're talking about today, to make sure that the quality of the product is as best as it can be. So I think, yeah, so that's one of the ways that I try and kind of bring it to life for people. And from a psychology perspective, it's the benefit of that is not just for the product itself and for the customer or the consumer. Actually, the benefit of doing that is for the employees and for the people themselves, because when you think about motivation at work, there's a model that describes how we become, there's lots of different models and to describe how we are motivated at work. One of my favorites is called the job characteristics model. And one aspect of how we gain motivation at work is called task significance. And that means that we know on a day-to-day basis, we understand the line of sight between what we do and that end goal and that end product. And so it's not just important to have this joined responsibility and for everybody understanding what their role is in making in ensuring the quality of a product. It's good for the quality of the product, but it's also good for our own motivation. So on so many levels, this is really important.
Okay, so no, I agree with you there. So it's not just about everyone having the buy-in that, you know, we're all here to improve quality, but, you know, as you say, it's also actually motivational for me as an individual. It gives me a sense of purpose. So
Definitely.
yeah, I like that, Erin. Thank you very much for sharing that. And Erin, going over to you, I'm sure you've heard that it's not my job saying many times working in quality. You know, what do you believe drives it?
I am guilty of saying this from time to time as well. I think we all have been in a situation where someone is like, well, this needs to happen. And you get a standoff where three people are pointing at each other saying, yeah, that's not within my job description. Now, I mean, sometimes it is true that whatever the task that needs to be done is the responsibility of somebody else. And I think in those cases, you got to look back to kind of there's something that one of my mentors told me early on in my career. There's the three P's. You have people, process, and product. Okay. It's going to be in one of those buckets. So when we get to people, well, maybe people don't have the knowledge to undertake the task. Okay. And in that case, they're going to delay or dither on the activity and hope that someone jumps in to help them. Maybe they don't have the motivation and they're just not going to do it. And then someone else has got to jump in and do it. And then you get into all the dynamics that come with that between enabling bad behavior, performance management. Ugh. So on the people side, there's a lot of factors that could lead to people saying, it's not my job. I think on the process side, so the second P there, if the processes aren't defined well, if you read the procedure or you read the work instruction and I'm like, okay, does Katie do that? Or does Aaron with an E do that? Or does Aaron with an A do that? Like if I read the document and I have no idea who does what, that's a really poor quality system. Like you should be able to read the document and know who's responsible for what, like who does the work, right? And then the last one on the product side, we may not know what the risk is. We may not know why the product works or what is causing the product to not work. And in those cases, people are afraid to be wrong. They don't know what to do. And at that point, they may be saying, yeah, not my job. You figure it out. And that's why, this happens a lot in the industry of people saying, not my job. It's going to be weaknesses in those three Ps.
Thanks very much, Aaron. And thinking about this myself as well, I suppose reflecting back into previous companies I worked with, I'm just, I think to myself, what is manifesting in the individual's realities that make them feel that it isn't their job? Are they not engaged? Is the quality goals, are they in everybody's goals for the year or just the quality departments? If quality is good, does quality get the pat on back? Does everybody, am I empowered as an individual to speak up or to get involved in quality initiatives, or is it much more of a control type of a setting? So I suppose just to reflect on, the reality of the actual behaviors, what people actually do, and how that makes individuals feel. Does it make them feel responsible, or does it make them feel like it's not their responsibility? And one initiative that could potentially work, and some companies use, is having quality champions that aren't necessarily in the quality department, that are peppered throughout the organization in order to get that cross-pollination across an organization. Just a potential thing that could be helpful. So, but I suppose the first thing you need to figure out is, what does good quality culture look like before, you can go to a destination, you have to know where it is. So, the first thing, I've always noticed about a good quality culture is it's intentional. It is being created on purpose. It's not something that is happening organically. It is something that the company is intentionally seeking out to do. Top management are involved. They are communicating, and people know where they stand. And this is a word that you hear a lot these days. It's a psychologically safe environment. And when I say psychologically safe, it's an environment where if there is an issue, I can bring it up. I can bring it to people's attention, and therefore the issue will be discussed and will be solved. You can often find in certain situations that people are afraid of bringing up mistakes because they're afraid of the repercussions. But if it's in a safe environment where I feel safe to share a mistake, and that it's a company potentially where they celebrate they celebrate the opportunity to learn and the opportunity to fix things as opposed to punish. So really, I have worked in some companies where people are afraid to speak up, and that doesn't help. It's where training and education is embraced. Everyone knows where they are. They have a good sense of what they do, where they fit into the big picture. And, it's very much championed from the top down. Leadership and management really do walk the talk. They really do set the tone, and they drive that culture. And, I referred to ISO 10010 earlier. That really does state top management's responsibility in terms of defining it, communicating the quality culture, and leading by example is listed there as well. So, it's really driven from the top down. And then it's the alignment. It's, it's what's observable, what you can see. It's the values, the mission. It's all the assumptions and what people actually say they're going to do and what they do. That all aligns, and that it's supported by a fit for purpose system, a fit for purpose quality system underneath, so that everything actually lines up. Because if you say you're going to do X, Y, and Z, but then your behavior and what you actually do is different, and people aren't going to believe it. People in a good quality culture, I find, are often very accountable and connected to the patient. I have worked in many companies before where they continually do activities and awareness activities that bring to life the fact that what they do is very much connected to the patient. In a previous place I worked, we'd often say that what do you do for a living? We save lives. People would always say we save lives. And as corny as some people might think that sounds, you were honestly bought into that rhetoric, and you had a big impact on patient care. And this final point is, it's already been brought up by Aaron. The true test of your culture is how you respond under pressure. And by pressure, it could be an audit. So it could be an audit, or it could be under pressure to produce more. And when I say how you act, so in an audit situation, if there's been a request for some documentation and, John Smith is the guy that's had to go in with this documentation, present it to the auditor, and something's found and there's a minor and major non-conformity, I mean, is it seen as, well, it's great that we've caught this, we can root cause it, we can make sure it's not a systemic issue, we can fix it, or does poor John Smith get a dirty look and seen as the person that let down the audit? I mean, how is it viewed? The same for production. If you have to make more units, you have to ramp up 20%. Does quality then fall by the wayside? Do people cut corners? Do people try workarounds in order to get those units out when they're under pressure? And, top management are also responsible here. If they want 20% more, what are they going to do to make it possible? Are they going to expect the same amount of people, the same amount of time with no actual, maybe lean study or changes to the process, that 20% is just going to materialize? Or are they going to increase capacity in some way, or, reduce production time in some way in order to achieve that? So, top management also have to consider the decisions that they make and the impact that they may have on quality culture. And it's very hard for leaders because they do have to self-manage. Erin, what's been your experience of good culture? What have you seen out there?
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, Aaron with an E.
Yes, thank you. And I'm sorry, Aaron with an E. So
that's okay, Aaron with an A. Hopefully we'll hear from you in a moment as well. Well, I mean, that's a very thorough summary, Katie, that you went through there, because those are all the things that I would be talking about when talking to somebody about, or talking to a team about how do we improve culture. These are all the things that I would list. If I absolutely had to hone in on a couple of points, the first one would be making sure that everybody, we've already covered it, but making sure that everybody feels responsible. Everybody feels responsible. And so this is what I've observed in the teams that I've worked with and the organizations that I've worked with over the last 20 years, that everybody feels responsible for making things better. And not just obviously what we've already talked about in terms of the longer, or the product outcome, but also that everybody feels responsible for making their working lives better together, and doing all the things that we need to do to make our team function better. And aligned to that, I would say that psychological safety is absolutely critical, because over a number of years, I was working in culture change, and I kind of one day sat down and really thought to myself, I've worked with teams, and on the face of it, many of these teams are similar in terms of the talent working in them, in terms of how they're set up, in terms of what they have access to on training and development and all of that. But some teams are just miles ahead in how they collaborate with one another, in how they perform, in how they contribute to the end goal together. And I always used to try and really scratch my head and work out what is the difference. And it was when I heard Amy Edmondson, who does so much research on psychological safety, when I heard her describe what psychological safety is, and she actually also often defines it as the absence of fear. That was my aha moment. I realized that's it. That is why these teams, the teams that don't experience fear when they come to work, they're not motivated by fear to do their work. Instead, they're there to genuinely get to the bottom of, you know, an issue when something arises, when a mistake, when an error occurs. Instead of feeling nervous to admit to it, people are open and honest about what's happened, and then are committed, as you said, Katie, to learning about it. Those are the teams where the culture is progressive and where the culture really thrives. So that would be my tuppence worth if I really had to kind of answer what is the thing that differentiates teams and organizations in terms of the productivity of their culture and the performance of their culture. That would be it: the absence of fear.
I like that. I've actually read Amy's book, The Fearless Organization. It's a very good book. And one study very early on, she talks about doing a study in a hospital of multiple different groups working in this hospital. And they had the lower performing and the higher performing teams. And she actually, when they did this study, she expected actually that the higher performing teams would make the least amount of mistakes, but they actually made the most amount of mistakes. And she was like, well, how is the highest performing team making the most mistakes? When she actually went in and observed both of all of these teams, the lower and the higher performing ones, it turned out that the lower performing ones made more mistakes. They just didn't report them. And that the higher performing team were very much about sharing and talking about and dealing with the mistakes and fixing them. And therefore they were the high performing team. So yeah, it's it's interesting. So for me, I think you have to be careful of how you look at metrics as well. Because if it's a low amount of non-conformities, is it because there is a low amount, or because people aren't actually reporting them? So I was going to ask a question to Aaron. You've worked in a number of organizations, okay? So in terms of a good quality culture, what is it those good companies you've worked for? What have they done well?
Yeah, so this all starts with the leadership. Specifically, the culture of the company is going to be dictated by the executive team. So what do they want to happen? What behaviors do they reward in a day-to-day setting? When there is a problem, how are they reacting? So the best companies I've worked for, so I've worked at Cardinal Health, I worked at Covidien, got bought by Medtronic, doesn't exist anymore, but a lot of Covidien people still out there. Waters Corporation, I went over to Europe and worked at two companies. Mundlicka, I worked at Fresenius Kabi. Now I'm at a small startup, Allotex, done a lot of training with industry organizations. And the best organizations, the best cultures always center around the leaders that create the type of environment that Katie and Aaron were just highlighting. And when you have an environment that is the opposite, okay, so there's fear, the leaders tear apart their employees, they demand unrealistic results, they don't give you the resources to succeed. That doesn't mean that you still can't make a difference in those companies. You just have to go from more of a global scope to more of a local scope. Okay, what can you do within your organization? How can you influence that? So for me, at the end of the day, it always starts with the leaders, their attitude and values, and how they create an environment for people to either foster or have a lot of conflict.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, Aaron. Thanks very much for that. So, we've discussed what a good one looks like, but, there's obviously going to be a lot of challenges, a culture doesn't form overnight. It's definitely more of a journey. And, the first thing you have to overcome, there's a challenge there, the perception that quality is a department as opposed to everyone's responsibility. You have to overcome that. That's within your mission statement, your vision, your values. And that's then walking the talk of that. It's then communicating, it's giving the resources, it's all those good things. But then there's also challenges in terms of balancing the flexibility to be innovative with the rigidity of compliance. And, as we say, sometimes there's a bit of a face-off between departments because who gets to win. But we talk about psychological safety, and sometimes people mistake that it's just a nicey environment where we all let each other get our own ways and and come to consensus. Really, it's a safe environment where healthy conflict and the ability to really openly discuss and have candid conversations where you can you can not agree, but that you're all in it for the right outcome, which is the best outcome for the patient. At the end of it is the priority. And talking about priorities, conflicting priorities, it's wanting to make less, make more with less time, reduce costs, save, and the priority of quality as well also can conflict. And the issue Aaron's already brought up, low or no stakeholder buy-in. You're the only one interested, or there's not enough people interested around you. That is a big challenge. And the big one, resistance to change. People are creatures of habit. We like things to be just the way we've always seen them. And people can be very resistant to change, especially when the culture is very ingrained over a long period of time and maybe is coming from, very high up. I would always say involve people in change, make people your change agents, and they're more likely to receive change better if they're part of that. If you're not going to go work away on quality culture on your own over here and then just push it on them. That you've got to make them part of it. But Erin, working with organizations to improve culture yourself. I mean, have you seen some of these challenges, or have there been different ones for you? Or
Again, all of the above.
okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. And actually, if I could just comment on the last one, I often say that people actually aren't resistant to change. People are just disempowered. They feel disempowered by it. And then it looks like resistance. So I don't think you're using the wrong word, but what I'm saying is, from a psychology perspective, if you delve one layer below, you'll find that it's just that people feel disempowered. So what I would always try and do in that situation is exactly as you've already said: get people involved, help them boost the belief that they have what it takes to get through whatever is coming their way, even if they don't know what that's going to be. So that's what in psychology we call self-efficacy. Because the problem with change, or the problem with asking people to do something differently to how they're doing it now, we're such creatures of habit, as you said, Katie. We all like a little framework that we have. This is how I do my job. And it's actually it's out of our comfort zone to do it in a different way. And when we're asked to do it in a different way, and that feels disempowering as well. It feels like I've lost my power. Um, so so a big focus that I would work on with team leaders is to really encourage them to make sure that their people feel empowered and feel that confidence and feel the self-efficacy that they can do it. They can, okay, it might be challenging. It might not be in the safe framework that we know and love right now, but actually we are able to perform in a slightly different way and change the way we do things. So I'd say that's one thing. Again, it's hard to choose, isn't it? Which is the biggest challenge, because all of these challenges come about in different ways. But that's one thing that I would always really focus on, just making sure that people don't feel disempowered.
Okay, thank you very much, Aaron. Aaron, for you then, what has been the challenges for you in your role that you've had to overcome?
Yeah, so I've been hired at multiple companies to come in and change the culture, basically get this site or get this organization ready for an FDA inspection. And you come in and you find out that it's total chaos. Like the quality system is broken, people are fighting, and there are a lot of things going on that really you wouldn't want anyone from the outside to see. And kind of the very first step that you have to look at is, for being a change agent, is what is the goal? Okay. If the goal is we need to be ready for an FDA inspection, okay, how do I get there? Right. I've got to have the right people. I've got to have allies, and I need to understand my processes and where my weaknesses are. And that's kind of how you have to. That's how I have went about addressing this. So looking at my own team, where are my strengths and weaknesses, and does my team structure and where people are sitting, does that support the goal? Okay, I get my own group in order. Then, okay, who are my allies? Which groups support the quality role and vision, and which ones don't? And then understanding the processes and using those processes and goals in conversations. Every conversation is a negotiation to try to what are we working towards? Okay, we're working towards an FDA inspection. Okay, what you're putting on the table, how does that help us prevent a potential finding in an FDA inspection? And those questions, the what and how type questions, are going to get the other side to think about, you know what, maybe it's not the best decision to do what we want to do here. So communicate, 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 and try to just consistently through repetition get people to move over. And you got to continually reevaluate all of those. My own team, my allies and stakeholders, our goals. Are we moving in the right direction?
Okay, so it's a lot about relationships there, Aaron.
You got to build good relationships, and it takes time. It can't, if it's transactional, people will know it. So it has to not, you have to put in the time to make it so people want to work with you, not they have to work with you.
Okay, I like that. I like that, Aaron. Good call. And what are the consequences of a poor quality culture? Well, this is a long list, but it's not necessarily exhaustive. There are lots of consequences. You've got your multiple non-compliance events. You've got your product recalls. Product recalls are obviously extremely expensive as well. That's not even including the impact that's going to have on the patient. Then when you're so busy putting out fires, you're completely in a reactive state because you're trying to do all of this over here and you're not in a proactive state anymore. You're not looking at continuous improvement. You're now just, trying to survive. And then ultimately you get a bad company reputation. And if you get a bad company reputation, your market share is going to go down. So you're getting hit in the pocket, you're getting hit in your reputation. You know, teams that are now not getting on, they're fighting against each other, people are watching their backs, you've got poor collaboration, you've got low psychological safety in these environments. This will all lead to higher employee turnover because I no longer feel like I have a purpose. I no longer feel connected to the vision and the mission of the company. I don't want to work for you guys anymore because you do stuff that I don't really agree with. And ultimately, you're going to have low employee referrals, and people don't even look at referrals. But if people aren't referring people, they care about their friends more than to refer them into the company. So, this is an issue. And ultimately, you've got patient injury and death, which is something you really don't want to see, because ultimately we're here to improve the lives of patients, not to hinder them. Aaron, in terms of consequences, I'm interested. Have you got a particular example that's in your head of where a poor quality culture has led to some of these or other consequences?
Yeah, I've been in multiple situations where, like I said earlier, they hired me to come in and get the site ready for an FDA inspection. And what you'll find is, specifically in the quality group, but there's also a lot of frustration in the other groups around, is that because of, I would say, the lack of support for doing things, fixing problems. Okay, we're just going to be firemen and run around all day. The high performers, the people that are jumping in and trying to fight those fires, they burn out and they leave. And then what ends up happening is you have a whole group of people that, it's not that they're bad people, they don't work efficiently, and they try not to take risks because they're afraid of getting called out. And then you kind of have this little malaise over everyone where no one's running. Everyone's kind of just walking around. Okay, there's no sense of urgency. And you hire a new person, they come in and they're all energetic, and then they're burned out in 3 months and they want to leave. So it's that kind of that turnover thing. We've all seen instances where there's been a fight over product. Okay, the product's rejected. Oh, I think it's good. No, there's too much risk. Product is released and it leads to a recall. And recalls cost a lot of money. Now, I've worked at organizations where, yeah, it's no big deal. It's within the budget. Now, if you don't have to spend the money and you save it, it directly impacts the bottom line. So there's kind of that organizational malaise that can come over an organization where it gets stagnant, people are afraid to take risks. You have a lot of employees that aren't motivated. That's probably the biggest consequence, because then everyone's asking for more resources. Oh, I need more people because we're not getting our work done, or there's a backlog over here, and that just continually compounds and hurts the bottom line.
Okay, so if you had a better quality culture, you wouldn't be losing those energetic good guys, and you wouldn't need as many people.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if you got a good quality culture, you're solving your problems, and
Yeah.
they're not tackling you over and over and over again. It's one of the most frustrating things at one of the companies I worked for, Waters. We had a single issue that came up every 4 or 5 months, and it was just everyone was so done with this, but we could never solve it because people didn't want to work on it. And it just continually pushed poor morale through the organization until we had an external auditor come in and said they found it and said, all right, here's a major nonconformance. And then we had to fix it. And we were able to get, it was a specification that was put in place that we were never going to meet. Okay. If we could never meet it, it never should have been implemented. So eventually we had to remove the spec, send it back to the design group, and they went back to the drawing board and drew up a specification that was realistic, something that the business would implement. And that took a ton of stress off of the organization.
If they'd just done it right first time, you probably would have saved yourselves a lot of time. I know. So that,
Brilliant.
there are a lot of consequences of having a poor quality culture, at the end of the day. And what we're going to talk about now is what are the roles of leaders in driving that quality culture. And for me, they are pivotal, they are central to it. They set the tone, they allocate or do not allocate resources, they create a psychologically safe environment. Now you can argue we all do, but they certainly form a very large part. They can create that environment where mistakes are shared and those problems are openly dealt with. What I would also say though is for leaders, it's not easy. You have to constantly be very self-aware and self-regulate. You have to understand when what you're saying isn't matching up with what's written on the wall or what you're kind of putting out there to the external environment, and what you're saying to people when you're being on your best behavior. It has to be authentic and it has to match your actions. And yes, sometimes you're going to have to make calls that you're not going to be popular for, but as long as it's staying true and to what we say we're going to do, then at the end of the day, you're doing the right thing. So it's not easy for leaders, but like I said about the ISO standard that's there, the 10,010 one, it does say that leaders, top management, are really at the top, and there are a number of responsibilities under their names, and one that sticks in my head is lead by example. That's one that's there. Then there's all about communicating, defining it, communicating it, making sure it trickles through, having the resources, the policies, the procedures, everything like that. They have to ensure that's all in place. That is top management's responsibility. So yes, 100%, I feel that the role for leaders in driving quality is a big role. In terms of leaders, what do you feel, Erin, what do you feel is a leader's role, and what can they do?
It's a great question, because as you said, Katie, it's a hard job. We forget sometimes, we give leaders so much responsibility in terms of what they have to do and what they have to manage, and they are ultimately responsible for the outcome of the team, but they are also responsible for this role modeling and this role modeling of emotional regulation, as you just said as well. And that is hard to go between one thing or another. Going back to Amy Edmondson, what I really like the way she described who has responsibility for psychological safety, herself and her colleague from Harvard Business School, Jeff Polzer, say that a leader's responsibility is to establish the norms that will create a psychologically safe environment. And then the thing about norms, of course, is that everybody has a responsibility for making them the norm. There's no point in establishing a norm and nobody else is following it. So how do they establish it? Well, I would say there's a number of things. Role modeling is one. So, walking the talk. And And then storytelling. So you mentioned communicating there as well. And I think obviously making sure that there's plenty and frequent communication about what's important, about what is expected of people. I think that's another thing. It's really important that people understand what is expected of them at a really granular level. And that can really help people understand how they should behave and what they should report and what they should not report, and how they should show up really every day. But storytelling is such an important way of creating psychological safety and creating a good culture, because it really brings it to life for people. So it's not just sending out an email or it's not just writing the list of values on the wall, because we've all been there. We've all been in organizations where values are on the wall and nobody lives them. Whereas a story will enable a leader to tell people an example of, well, this is an example of something that happened where I made a mistake, and here's how I handled it. Here's how we learned from it. And here's why it's important that if you make a similar mistake, that you tell me and that you tell us and that we all learn from it. So I think that's, really, really getting good at storytelling, really getting good at role modeling, and, even stopping sometimes and saying, and not just the leader to be the role model, it's everybody on the team. So stopping people and saying, listen, what Katie just did there, that is exactly what we need to see in this team. So it's not just leaders themselves aren't the only role models. It's up to the leader to also point out where other people are role modeling too.
I like that, and it's the sense of vulnerability that, if I can show that I can be open about mistakes in front of everyone, that I'm not perfect, then, people will follow suit and feel that they're also safe to do so. So I really like that. And the point you also made about rewarding and punishing there, and I think that's really important, because sometimes you say your organization cares about X, Y, and Z, but actually, if you look at the way your company rewards and punishes in terms of, they reward meeting their output, but they mightn't reward good quality decisions, that are being made that might actually cost the company money, but they were still good quality decisions. So it's what they celebrate and what they also punish are really that's going to also show up into actually how they actually feel, those underlying assumptions.
100%.
For sure. Aaron, where does culture start for you? I think this is a subject that's close to your heart.
Yeah, so in an organization, the culture is always going to start with top management, the organizational culture, based on everything that you've just said, both you and Aaron. What do they say in public? What do they do behind closed doors? Are those the same thing? If they're not, people aren't going to trust what the executive leaders are saying, and you're going to get a lot of people that are afraid to take risks, or if someone does take a risk and it doesn't pan out, they're not with the company anymore, or whatever ends up happening there. So it does, like within a company, it always starts with the top leaders, the ones making decisions about resources, personnel, those types of things. So if they're not listening to the organizations under them, taking that feedback and reacting and showing some positive change coming out of that, the culture is not going to be probably where a lot of people would want it to be. It probably isn't going to be the best culture. Now, as far as me personally, well, the culture that I set for my group, that starts with me. And even if my leaders above me are not putting out a good culture, I myself can create a good culture within my team, and I can try to influence those stakeholders around me by modeling the behavior that I want others to take on. So in those instances, I have one-on-ones with almost everyone in my team, and I'm asking them, okay, what frustrates you daily? What's one thing I can do to make your job here easier? Right. And they're going to say things that I'm not going to be able to do anything about. Like, I'm really frustrated that we never get communication from the corporate group until months after decisions are made. Yeah, I'm frustrated with that too. So recognize that frustration. And then I can think about ways that maybe how I could push back a little bit to try to get information, and then share information when I get it. But there are ways that you can manage your own sphere of influence or your own group to relieve tension and show that you're taking feedback and acting on it to help improve that culture. And then hopefully that can spread. Unless those top leaders are pushing good culture down and creating the environment, it's always going to be an uphill fight. It's going to be frustrating. There's going to be one step forward, two step back. So that's the environment you're working in. It doesn't mean all hope is lost. It just means it's going to be a lot harder than maybe it should be.
Thanks very much, Aaron. I feel like I want to go get a job working for you. Um, I realise I've probably run over a bit in terms of time. This is the last slide. You know, it's really talking about where do we start. And one thing I will say very quickly about culture is it doesn't get fixed overnight. It's like going to the gym. You're going to go to the gym for 2 to 3 times a week for maybe 3 months before you really start to notice any improvements. If you then stop going to the gym, you're going to go backwards. So culture does take a very long time to build. And then once you've built it, you have to sustain it. You have to ritualize it. You have to embed it. So don't expect that you're going to do something one day and it's going to change everything. But it's just those little habits. It's that continuous chipping away over and over, like a river forming, like water forming a river. It's slow, it's steady, but it gets there, and then eventually it's ingrained. So, don't lose hope if something doesn't come like a week in. In terms of next steps, you really have to get buy-in. Ideally, you're going to go all the way to the top. You're going to get buy-in from the top of the organization. That does involve influencing up. You may not be close enough connected yourself. You may need to influence right up the organization to somebody more senior. If you can't get to the top, get to the top of the chain in your locality, get to the top of the site. Or if you can't get that high, get to the top of your value stream or your area or your department, however high up you can go. And then once you've started implementing everything, once you've actually started to form that quality culture and you've developed that pocket, because it's better to have a pocket of good culture than none at all. Well, then you can use the qualitative and quantitative data, the good news story to influence up. You can say, well, actually, we've done it here and it worked. And this is what we got. Do you guys do you want in? You can influence then, you can trial it on a small scale. It's important to say that everyone can influence culture. Don't be disheartened if you feel like it's only you. Just like a rotten apple in a barrel, a good apple can also have just as much impact. So, keep quality culture at your focus. There are then many more steps you can do. I actually recommend the standard, the ISO 10010. I've had a good read of it. Like many standards, it's high level, but it's quite systematic. It works through different levels and different activities, and it does give guidance. There is lots more information out there in terms of what the FDA are doing with the quality management maturity. So there's a lot of good information out there you can get hold of. Leap Compliance, we've developed a course on cultivating quality culture, which is aimed at those leaders, which will take a much deeper dive into how those cultures form, the best practice for how you can, put together a plan for what you want that to look like, tools and techniques for analyzing, then some information and some work and some real kind of hands-on stuff about how you're going to get there and how you're going to implement that and sustain that. So feel free to have a look on the website, www.leapcompliance.com. You'll get more information on the course there. And obviously feel free to reach out to us to ask more information or ask us questions. But that comes to the end now. We're on questions. I'm just going to do 5 minutes because we have run over. Let me see, do we have any questions? Give me a second. Okay, questions. Okay, guys, how do you get buy-in from the top? Erin, do you want to go for it?
Katie, I think the slide that you had on the consequences of poor quality culture is a good place to start. So, you listed out all of the things that could happen. So I think, that's in my experience when in working with HR teams, for example, who want to drive culture change, in working with senior leaders who'd like to drive culture change, and they're trying to bring it to the exec team. You have to paint the picture of what could go wrong if you don't fix it. I think, that's where you've got to go. Because ultimately senior leaders are thinking about shareholder value, they're thinking about the bottom line. And that's not to say that they won't connect it. Of course they will, but it might not be their top priority right now. But if you put it in terms of, this is what's going to happen if we don't act on this, then I think it makes it quite clear.
You're going to make a burning platform, and I suppose you need to know what's important to them at the end of the day, Erin. And if it is a good culture, if it is financial, whatever it might be, you kind of need to tap into that. And I always say, if you can't influence the person you want to influence, you could potentially influence a person that does have their ear. So it mightn't be a direct, it could be sideways. There are more than one ways to skin a cat. Oh, we have another question here. If you are working for an immature organization, apart from getting buy-in from the top, what would be some tangible actions, low-hanging fruit, you could take to drive a quality culture? Aaron, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, on the last question, I thought I was unmuting and I turned off my camera. So, but so this one, right? If you're in an immature organization, so it's either growing or you're just kind of building the quality system itself or establishing the groups, I would say the quickest way to get a big impact is to focus on the documentation and to make sure the documentation is clear around who does what. So who is responsible for doing what, and the procedures and work instructions are clear and simple to follow. The more complex your product, the more complex your process, that can be challenging. It's actually very difficult to come up with a simple process. It's quite easy to make something really complex that no one knows how to understand or follow. So it does take a lot of work, but focus on those processes themselves. Then on top of that, build relationships with the most important stakeholders. So if you're in the quality group and you're always working with the operations team, whoever that is, process engineer, a supervisor, a manager, build a relationship with them, whether it's going out to lunch every other week and just chatting about things, or asking them, what's bothering you, what's bugging you at work, and trying to work at solving those problems to build up a little credibility with your stakeholders. Again, then, so they see you as someone that's helping them solve problems instead of creating problems. You don't want quality to be a roadblock. Like, we didn't get into the discussion of quality versus compliance. They're not the same thing. Like, you can have compliance and have bad quality. So you want to make sure that you are providing value, you're providing solutions, and you're protecting the customer at the end of the day.
I agree there, Aaron. So we're really saying get your foundations right. And I worked in a company, and they did have a good quality culture, and there were small things that they did on a regular enough basis. One of the things they did was the quality policy is quite a big document. But for everybody else, we had on our ID cards just one line of the quality policy, and that was the only thing we had to remember. And I can still remember it today. I improved the quality of patient care and all things Boston Scientific was written on my badge. And I remember it, and I left Boston Scientific in 2012, and I still remember that. So you were very much felt accountable and part of it. We had product and anatomy training. We knew what our devices did. We had patient stories. Annually, we might have a patient come in and tell us their story, etc. So connecting them to, the purpose, the ultimate higher purpose of what we're doing. So definitely there are little things that you can do, as long as you do them regularly and it's not a one and done thing, that can create that, feeling of involvement. So that's above and beyond the foundational work that you have to do. But like Aaron said, I've also worked for a company that their quality systems were subpar. They weren't really good enough. They were fraught with loopholes. You could quite easily make a mistake that wouldn't get caught. And if people don't care enough to put in a good system, why should you care enough? Kind of feeling you get from that. So yeah, definitely good foundations is a good thing. Thank you for asking that question, and thank you everyone for coming today to today's webinar. I'm going to let you all go because we are way over time. We are a good 12 minutes over time. But before we go, I want to thank everyone for coming, and I want to especially thank Erin and Aaron for being here today as speakers on today's subject.